Well, hey, y'all, and welcome to the Everyday Truths podcast, where we break down truths that are true today and every day so that we can go and live them out in our lives. My name is Sherry, and I'm the creator of Everyday Truths. And today we have an incredible conversation with you with Damaris Fike, who has a unique personal mission for the church. And so I know that this is going to be a blessing to you. And so let's hop in and uncomplicate church together. Well, hey, Damaris.
Hey, Sherry.
How are you?
I'm good.
You're good.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you're here today.
I am so glad to be here.
Today, we have a great topic. I'm so glad that you're here. Damaris and I have known each other for a long time now, like well over a decade.
Yeah.
And she has such a unique perspective on the topic we're going to be talking about today. And so I'm so glad you agreed to be here, because you're going to bring so much to this conversation. And I am confident it is going to be just such a blessing to those who watch and listen. So thank you for being here. And I've kind of been trying to find interesting ways for people to get to know you a little bit different. And so right now, you are a big Office fan.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, like I'm convincing you right now that that's the case. No, Damaris is such a big Office fan that when you told me that you were pregnant with Avi, right, with your third daughter, you sent me an Office gift to tell me.
No way.
You did. You didn't actually tell me. You sent me the gif of like Jim like freaking out when he finds out that Pam is pregnant. That's
right.
how, and I just like, you knew I would get it. And so, because I'm a fan too. And so being such an Office fan, we are going to quiz your skills.
Okay.
Okay. I found this, I didn't think it was too difficult.
Okay.
But we'll see. We'll see how it goes. And it's a quiz, so it's a BuzzFeed quiz because, the ultimate authority. And so we're going to go through this. All right. Ready? So these are quotes, and you have to decide who said them. I think it starts easy and it kind of gets harder. Okay. Are you ready? Number one, today smoking is going to save lives.
And they're all Office characters.
100%. I can give you options.
Okay, say it again.
Okay. This one's an easy one. All right. Today, smoking is going to save lives.
Michael Scott.
This one, I don't even have to try, is Dwight. It's like the fire safety. Nobody's taking like the safety protocols, right? And so it's like he's like smoking a cigarette, and he's like, today smoking is going to save life, as he like catches the office on fire. Ready? I'll slap you in the face with a rainbow.
I want to say Stanley. I think it's the Christmas doll episode.
Oh my goodness.
Was I right?
Yes.
Yes.
Stanley? Whoa, there we go. All right. Sometimes I'll start a sentence and I don't even know where it's going. I just hope I find it along the way. I feel like this is my life.
Your anthem? It's Michael.
1000%. That's such a good one. And finally, there's too many people on this earth. We need a new plague.
Dwight.
That is Dwight energy all the way. And so there we go. So you mean like you got in a better groove at the end. Yeah. As it got more difficult, you actually did better.
Yeah.
But I was surprised you didn't get today smoking's going to save lives.
Now I can picture it, but
yeah.
It's
I couldn't show you the picture. It showed who said it. So
that's true.
I made Tiffany, who was last episode, do Taylor Swift or Lamentations because she's a Swiftie. Hilarious. I wanted to find one that was like Michael Scott or Moses or something like that. You're not going to confuse those.
Yeah.
So
you got to make it.
You got to make it. I'll work on it. We'll work on it later. Anyway, it's what valuable use of time, probably.
Yeah.
Sure. And so what I want to talk about today is church. Why can church feel complicated? And so before we get into that, though, the reason I invited you have a unique mission statement. And I remember the first time you shared it to me, we were in our 20s and you're like, yeah, my personal mission statement. I was like, are you like a grown up? Like, I've never known somebody that had like a personal mission statement. Like, it's like, but you shared it with me and I just loved it. And I know you've changed some phrasings and stuff like that, but will you share that with us really quick? Your personal mission.
Yeah. So, my personal mission is to rebrand the church back to the original intent of Jesus.
What is rebranding?
Yeah, it's like you have a brand, which is like not just your logo, but like everything about who you are, what you do, how you make people feel. And so a rebrand is kind of shifting some of those elements to show a different thing,
Yeah.
show a different brand. And so when it comes to rebranding back to Jesus's original intent, it's about going back to what Jesus intended the church to be.
Yeah. It's almost like there have been rebrands that perhaps have gone away from what Jesus originally intended. And so you want to hit the reset button on that.
Yeah.
You want the church to look the way, to feel the way, to have the impact that Jesus intended for it to have.
Yeah.
And so why do you think church can feel complicated to folks?
I think there's a lot of reasons. I think one, there's just so many like religions, and also within the Christian faith, so many denominations and like different types of churches. And so I think even understanding what all these structures and denominations are can be confusing, or what's right. And there's differing opinions. And so it's like, well, who's right, who's wrong, and if you are a person that actually shows up to like a gathering, I mean, it could go many ways. Like the language that people may use, or the things that they do, or how they express their faith may be different than what you're used to, or what what you think is normal. And so, I mean, there's a lot of reasons, but that could be someone kind of like trying to understand like what church is about. Like some of those, things
It's
could be,
confusing. Absolutely. And I think it's confusing for both those who are in the church, maybe if they've only ever known like a specific type and style of church, and those on the outside. Some of my favorite stories are of folks like it's like the first time they showed up to a church, and like their experience like of what it is. Like I heard a story recently of somebody that showed up to a Catholic church, and they were like, wait, oh, we stand up now? Okay, we kneel down? Like what? We like, it's like that, they sing real loud and they yell amen. And then you have others that it's like, you sit and you're quiet. Like, why are you making sound right now? And so that can feel complicated. And in addition, maybe you've just never gone to a church and you're like, why would I go there? Like, or how do I even start? Another thing I think about is I think sometimes folks, if they've made that decision, like, you know what, I should go to church. I should go to church. Our family should go to church. It's like the guilt that can come with not going. Maybe not feeling comfortable. Thinking folks in the church are hypocritical. Like your experience with folks from the church is confusing because maybe you've heard like what Jesus said and what he taught and all of those things. And then you look at followers of Jesus and you're like, the heck? Like what are like
when it comes to like, you think organized religion, there's like this, you're checking off this checklist, right? There's things you got to do, things you shouldn't do or can't do. And so I think that in itself, it gets complicated because there's a laundry list of things that you got to do or you shouldn't do. And it's like, well, is there something for every aspect of my life? Like, I think that can be complicated.
And so it's so crazy how many of our conversations in this Uncomplicated series, it's like every single time it comes back to checklists get talked about. It's so interesting how much that can feel like an element of complication. And another one I've heard is like, why would I go to church? I don't get anything out of it. Like, there's no value in coming here. And I think another one is whenever I go to church, they just ask for money. Like, that's what it's there for. Like, hypocrites asking for my money, right? They just don't see a value and a purpose in going to a church and being a part of a church community. And maybe there's other reasons that church has felt complicated to you. The question then becomes, what is church supposed to be? What is it supposed to be? And so can I go like theology nerd for a minute?
Yes,
like
please.
Greek nerd? All right. So let's give some background. And so Jesus, when he uses the word, he talks about church. It's the word ecclesia. And when we just take that word, he says, talks about Peter, the rock I'm going to build my church on. But we can look, and ecclesia is actually, the word means gathering. Not necessarily, it doesn't mean building. It means gathering. I've heard it said like, no, the church are those who are called out. I think that's a cool definition, but I think I would also can draw to examples when it isn't necessarily really like organized and formal. It's just truly like a gathering of people. And so Jesus is saying, hey, we're going to build a gathering of those who follow Jesus and are trying to live out what it is that he's taught, to share what he's done for people. And so we started with ecclesia. We started with a gathering. And then over time, things get organized. Like, right when you say church, you don't think the gathering of people. Typically, you think of the building on your street corner that has a cross on it. And then in addition to that, what we've seen is over time, then church tradition get added. And so that's where you go, wait, why does this church do this and this one doesn't? And so it's like we have this progression from gathering to brick and mortar, and then we've kind of added traditions over time that brings us to like the modern church. And so I want us to rewind back because you have great insights on this. And so what was it supposed to be? Or how did it start?
A lot of what I feel and look at is the church in Acts, right? The way they were just in community and how they shared resources. They had, teachings and prayers and things like that, but the way they were there to love one another. And I think what I love the most about it is there's a scripture that says that they loved so well that other people saw and believed in Jesus too. And I think that's the rebrand, right? Like if we love in a way that shocks people, that's countercultural, people will notice that, the way we love. And I think that's the truest sense of church.
It's so beautiful how we see this community formed based on what they heard and what they saw and what they shared with one another. Of course, they did have the Jewish scriptures, but that was specific to those who were Jewish. And we saw the Gentile church explode, especially as, it spread first among the Jews. And then you had Paul who came and took it to the Gentiles. So let's talk about that really quick. How we go from like Acts 2, like the first day of this movement. And then as the church began to take on some structure, especially I'm thinking about Paul.
Yeah. So, I mean, what we know is that then these different communities, different towns and cities started having their own gatherings, right? And so Paul is writing letters to these different churches. So they must have a mailbox, right?
Yeah.
That's how it works?
For sure.
That makes it official.
Absolutely. Postage stamp.
So, yeah. So he's communicating to these churches and, when there is no structure, sometimes it's a little chaotic and, things may not look like other churches. And so Paul's letters, they were guiding these gatherings in this body of believers and like just more information and just kind of reminding them about what Jesus taught. The church is like a body, the arms, legs, they all have their purpose and they function together. And then he talked about walking in the way of love. And so as believers, as followers of Jesus, that's what we needed to go back to. And always, that's the thing that we needed to anchor ourselves in.
Yes.
Walking in the way of love.
So what did that look like in action?
Yeah. So the church, they were almost countercultural in the day, like the way they loved, the way they probably mix social, economic, differences in that. Like it was just different than what the culture was in that time. And it continued to be that. And they would even, stories of taking in babies that were abandoned, like they would do things, they would take care of widows and orphans and really help the vulnerable and the marginalized, the way they elevated women, like all these things that were, unheard of in those days. There wasn't like this to-do list, right? It was all about what does love require from us? Like how should we love? And this is what they saw. They saw hurting people. They saw widows. They saw orphans. They saw women being mistreated. And so they did something. And I think And we continue to see that in how it evolved. And we look at like hospitals now, right? Like they all have names of denominations or some faith base. Like they wanted to take care of the sick and help those that were injured. You see a lot of nonprofits have roots in Christianity because that was a way of loving not only in the body of believers, but beyond.
They're taking what they know and they're living it out. It's like they see a problem and they go, you know what? We can do something about that. We can help with that. We can love in this way, not because there was a checklist, but because they were living out and applying what it is that they did know. And they had guidance from folks like Paul to go, okay, like to guide and to help them to stay away from maybe distractions and other things. And you were talking about just the legacy of the church. We see like hospitals and we see nonprofits and we see a lot of really amazing things. There are some negative things in church traditions that have happened, abuses that have happened. I think about the Crusades and we see hypocrisy. We see all kinds of different things. If we offer all of the benefit of the doubt in the world, we could say all of these church traditions that kind of happened over time, whether it was holidays, denominations, the way that people worship, if we offer the benefit of the doubt, we could say, okay, these were different people in different eras trying to figure out what it looked like to love and to follow Jesus in their context. In the sense, like it's like a constant rebrand of going, okay, what does this look like for us? Because we're not all first century Jewish people. In fact, none of us living are. And so, it's like you see these tiny rebrands, they stack. And so there's something so significant about your personal mission of not just stacking from the last generation of traditions, the last generation of applications, whereas we can learn such a significant amount from them, but going, oh, no, let's go all the way back to the beginning. What did Jesus intend? And how do we do that? And so that's the question for me, for you. Or if there's anything else you want to add about the early church in action.
Oh, I was going to say about mission creep.
Oh, yeah. That's a good one. I love that. Mission creep. So talk about that. Mission creep. That's a good one. And so define that for folks.
Yeah. So when I'm thinking about like the good and the bad that we see in the church history, like all these centuries, I think of mission creep. So like in an organization, a lot of nonprofits, like you have one mission, right? And there's just so many things that you can do that will be great, that may benefit some people, but you start doing other things that kind of take you off of the path of what you're trying to accomplish. Mm-hmm. And so I think in the church, like, it's not that these things are inherently bad or not good, but we always have to redirect to our mission and make sure that we're on target.
And so it's easy for our mission to creep, like Mission Impossible, but mission creep. No. It's easy for it to start to creep, and it can do that for so many reasons. Imagine when you're young and you're like, I'm going to be a doctor when I grow up. Maybe that's not the right thing for you, but it's like, mission creep is like, it's like you lose sight of that, and it's more fun hanging out with your friends than studying or whatever. It's like we lose sight of that thing out in front of us that we're like, that's the right thing. And I think we see that in the church as well.
And going back to that point of like rebranding isn't about stacking something else on top, right? It's about stripping away. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying get rid of all traditions or brick and mortars and all of that, but it's like, how can we ensure that the purest form of what Jesus asked us to do is being done? Mm-hmm. And it's not about this organization. It's not about what the organization is doing. It's, as a follower of Jesus, what am I doing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. Makes me think of like a piece of furniture that's been painted over and over again. And you're like, oh, it's scuffed again. Let's repaint it. But then there are folks who, especially older furniture that has like some like great, like rich wood under it. You go, no, we're going to strip it down and we're going to get back to the table that's underneath it. And the this beauty of this, this wood that we can polish and we can do all the things that we can restore. And it's not like it looked like a table the whole time. Mm-hmm. Like people ate on it and had conversations over it. It always looked like a table. The different colors probably looks cool. It's still a table. And there's something significant to returning to that.
Yeah.
And no, it's beautiful. And I love what you said. You're like, but it starts with you. Jesus, when he said, I'm going to build my gathering, he was talking to individuals. He wasn't talking to a building. And so how do we do this? How do we rebrand? Like about when it comes to church, if we could hit reset right now, what would that look like? And how do we get there?
You know, it starts in our homes. Like, how do we love our children? And you're like, yeah, of course we love our children, our spouse, or, my parents. But it's how can we love in the way that Jesus loved, like sacrificially? How can we, and it's not even in those moments where it's easy, but in those difficult times when when you'd rather just walk away, like, how do we show up for those people? And then I think it goes to our friends and our family, extended family, but even in our workplaces, like, they could be hard, right? Like, to walk in the way of love if you work in a place where maybe you feel people are against you, or like there's just a lot of politics, and to continue to uphold that and like walk in the way of love, and how do we sacrificially love those that we get to do life with every day in our workplaces or at school? And I think beyond that, what are we doing for just people that may be in-housed or like have food insecurities? Like, there's just so much need in our world. And I'm not saying everyone has to sign up to go volunteer somewhere. If you want to do that, that's great. But there are ways that you can love. And I think as believers, sometimes God even gives us these promptings. When we see something, act on those things.
I love the way that you described the early church like this. It's because it's like they saw needs and they met those needs with the poor, the unhoused, orphans, widows. And it's something too, like we have those promptings. It's like we see someone and we go, man, I should help. I should say something. I should ask them if they're okay. And how easily do we justify away? We vision drift in that moment. It's like, I know what's right. And then I'm going to drift away because I'm going to justify what it is. And I think, what I hear you saying is like, if we want to rebrand the church, it's like we have to rebrand our perspective of what church is, because we are. We are ultimately the church. We are the gathering. We are the ones who are showing love. Being the church looks less like walking into a building and more like loving our community.
And I think even in the season we're in of just politics and all of this, like, it's easy to get angry, and like, trust me, and to be like, to snap back or to like fight for what you feel is right. And I think to an extent, like, you got to do what you feel is right. Like, if there's injustices that you feel or see, but I think in the end, like, look at the other person, not as someone you're against, but as a child of God, as someone that God sent his son Jesus down to die for. And if we live with that perspective, and I know it's hard for me, but if we live with that perspective, I think it makes it easier to love those that may have differing opinions or may be doing things that you just don't agree with.
Yeah, I can remember a lot of Paul talking about like, hey, will y'all get along already? Like, hey, and he even says, hey, for the sake of Christ, for the sake of the mission and what he's asked us to do and how he has told us to live, will you like get along with each other, love each other, offer benefit of the doubt to one another, like find resolution, find agreement, and not agreement like you all like, have the same, I don't know, political views or whatever that looks like. But he's like, he speaks to the church so specifically about like division does not have a place here. Like, you are here for a mission and you are here for a purpose and you are here to show God's love. And so set those things don't matter. Paul's never like, hey, y'all fight more. Like, it's no, love more and love better and show others.
Yeah.
And so we've said like, how do we rebrand is we individually do it. And so practically, how do I rebrand?
Yeah, so we are brand ambassadors, right? Like, we are the ones people are looking at as we do this.
You're the
And,
billboard.
yeah. And the thing is, we're not going to get it right every time. And I think that's the beauty of it, right? Like showing grace not only to others, but to ourselves when we, mess up. And so, but I think it's going back to the way of love. And how do we learn that? By seeing what Jesus did, by learning his teachings and the way and following his teachings. And so as a believer, it's important for me to stay plugged in and to like really look at his life and see, how did Jesus react in these situations? How did he love and show that tangibly to others? And so I think it's going that way. That's how we brand as an individual, as part of the larger church.
This may be going kind of like too deep into it, but you and I both worked for churches. You actually did a lot of social action work. And so, right, it was your job to create, I'm going to oversimplify, but to create opportunities for people to serve in the community and pieces like that, to do the mission work through the church. And I remember often people being like, well, why doesn't the church do this more? As if it was the church, the brick and mortar, the people in charge. It was their job not only to create opportunities, but it's like my church does this. And now you're like, okay, church, you're not doing enough. But like, where's the accountability on yourself? Even if like your church doesn't create those opportunities that you want, like what's the barrier stopping you? It's because I think we've gotten this idea in our head that the church, brick and mortar, should do good in our community. But we don't necessarily think of ourselves as individuals. And you're flipping the script.
And to think about it is you have access to places that maybe the brick and mortar does not. We don't have
100%.
We don't have access to that coworker. We don't have access to, that group of friends that you meet with. We don't have access to maybe an organization that you're connected to.
That is just such an incredible point, because churches, brick and mortar, they stay in one place. Like their foundation, like they are attached to the ground, but you're not.
Yeah.
You walk out. There shouldn't be a divide between the sidewalk and the parking lot when you walk out of church. And no, but you can go out into your community, into your workplace, into your neighborhood, into, you could name 1,000 different places, into your family and the relationships that you have there, because how often have we known, like, it's like you're bright and shiny at church and then you're like fighting on the way home, but all of us.
Yeah.
And so but that's so beautiful. I'm not even saying it well. Say it better.
Right. Well, I could share a story. I was getting my 8-year-old Thea and my 4-year-old Ruth ready for church, and she's like, "Are we going to school?" I was like, "No, we're going to church." And she's like, "Oh, Amy's church?" I was like, "Yeah, Amy's church." And so she's talking about it, and Thea's like, "Ruthie, it's called City Church." And I was like, and so she went on and she's like, "No, it's Amy's church." And she's like, "But it's called City Church." And so I said, Thea, it can be Amy's church. And so the reason for that is Ruth, like sometimes she has some difficulties adapting to new spaces, to, getting, trying new things.
Yeah,
and Amy was one of she's a volunteer in our kids' church. And Amy was one of the first people that Ruth kind of connected with there. And every time Ruth would walk into Kid City, like Amy would light up and be, "Ruthie, like, how are you?" and give her a hug. And it was a way that Amy made Ruth feel that drew her back to this place. And I know it's like a building, but it wasn't about the building. It was about Amy, And I think in the same way, like when we love in a way that's authentic, that's true, that's like just unbelievable, in a way that, people are like, "Why do you love that person? Why would you do that for that person when they treat you like this or say that?" When we love in a way that surprises people, it doesn't just draw people to us, it draws people to Jesus.
That is so incredible. And I love that so much, because it's it is just as much Amy's church as it is City Church. And she was the church in just like loving a young person that was right in front of her. And isn't that it? We are the church when we are loving the person that is just right in front of us. And it's so beautiful because that's where church happens, right? Church happens when we love. Church happens when we show up. Church happens when we listen. Church happens when we smile and we give a hug. And I mean, there's so many. I mean, I'm sure you could fill in the blank a million ways.
I mean, church happens when we show grace to someone who's maybe wronged us or have failed. Church is when we go out to serve, connect with other organizations and find out what the needs are. I also think church happens when we stand up for injustices and call out things, people in power, things that are oppressing people or hurting people. I think church happens when you get in a fight with your spouse and have the courage to have an honest conversation. Church happens when, you may be in a work environment that may seem difficult or challenging, but instead of being part of any toxicity, you find a way to show love and grace in those situations. And so church happens when you love the person right in front of you.
This is such a great conversation. And it's highlighting so many things for me in this moment of, like the small group that I sit in and the way that community loves one another. And there's just so many layers I think of. It made me think of a story. And I'd love for this person to come and share their story, big picture. But I want to share something I got to experience once. I was, at the time, worked for a church. And so somebody comes right like at closing time. And I want to get home. I want to go to see my kids and be with my family and all that are good things and okay things to want. And he comes up just last second. And so this may sound heartless, but really often we'd be like, hey, can I set up a time to meet with you later? But I just sensed something. And so I said, hey, why don't you come in? Let's talk for a minute. And so this person shares with me just some struggles that they've been having specifically with addiction. But I happened to look out and I saw someone outside of like this where we were meeting. I saw someone who is somebody that is an active member of the AA community. So I kind of snuck out and I was like, hey, would you mind coming and just talking to this guy? Because he just has a lot of questions and I think your voice may matter more. And so he comes in and sits down and he goes, and his name's Josh, and I'll make sure I get his permission before I share this, but he goes, hi, I'm Josh. I'm an alcoholic. And he sits down like the way that you would start like an AA meeting. And I'm like, what's happening? And just to watch him come in and then the way that he spoke to this man and the way that he spoke truth and the way that he spoke love and the way that he just engaged and empathized and it was incredible. Like I feel so blessed to have witnessed, to have gone to church through the loving words of someone who just was like, I get it and I'm here. And not everyone is the right person to speak to, say, addiction, but he was the right person. And it just was it's like, as you were talking, it's just such a beautiful reminder of like church can look like a lot of things. And in that moment, that was the kind of church that guy needed. Oh my gosh, incredible. And so it's those moments, it's a children's volunteer who makes someone feel seen. Or there's all these, maybe we all have stories, whether it's a children's volunteer or whether it's somebody that's willing to sit in front of you and go, hi, I'm Josh and I'm an addict or I'm an alcoholic. Like, it's so beautiful. So any parting thoughts?
Just, I feel hopeful. Like, I think we can go back to what was. And I don't want to, I know there's a lot of bad things that have happened through the church, in the church, but I do believe there's a lot more good. And so my hope is that what's good is amplified and that it just saturates. And so people in the world don't see like the negative parts, but really what's happening and how we're loving really gets lifted up. And so I'm hopeful that those days are coming. And if we all say yes, it will.
And we don't even have to, sound strange, we don't have to say yes together. Like we don't have to come together and be like, hey, all Christians, let's do this better. You know what? You start with you.
Yeah.
And see what happens. See what happens. And watch how it's contagious. Because you've been contagious on me, for sure. And so, let's go be contagious on some other people. It's gross. Anyway, well, this has been such a wonderful conversation. I'm so grateful you were here and you shared just your wisdom and your insight and your heart for rebranding the church and uncomplicating the church and taking it back to what Jesus always intended for it.
Thank you, Sherry.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right, guys. Well, thanks for watching, and we'll see you later. Well, thanks for listening today. I hope this conversation was a blessing to you. I know it was for me, and I am walking away with a different perspective when it comes to the church and how to uncomplicate that. And so if you haven't already, make sure that you are following the Everyday Truths podcast, wherever it is that you listen to podcasts. In addition, I encourage you to come catch me on social media, whether that's Instagram or TikTok. Come over, give a follow, because there's lots of cool content that comes out every single week to just hopefully make your day better and help you to live your faith out in everyday ways. And so those links are all available attached to this episode. And so I hope you'll go and check those out too. All right. And so until next week, we'll see you then.